This week, we welcome Fred Mwungaguhunga, founder of Media Takeout, the #1 urban celebrity online news outlet.
You make a bunch of decisions on the course of a day. You decide, hey, let's invest to do this, go into this growth opportunity, and it doesn't work. And most of the stuff that you do doesn't work, but you have to look on the bright side of everything. You say, okay, this didn't work, and we spent a lot of money, and we lost a lot of money on this, but what did we learn? And there's always something that you learn from it. And, I always start thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I just had to, that money that we invested that disappeared was really just paying for that lesson that we learned.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com. All right, I'm with Fred Mwungaguhunga, everyone. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Hey, good to be here.
It's so nice to have you. I seriously was just saying your last name is the coolest last name I've ever heard.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah,
and I've heard other things about it too.
I'm sure. Yeah, growing up, it might have been challenging. I have a very boring last name. My real last name. So it was. I've got to kind of hide. But my first name, Bridget, was ripe for mockery.
Really? I mean, that's a pretty popular name nowadays, right?
Is it? It's coming back.
It's weird how kids' names go in and out of style.
Yeah.
Because now in my kids' school, there's very few Johns and James and Pauls, and that was the most popular names when I was growing up. So
yeah, that's the same as me. My daughter, I just had a little girl 9 months ago, and we named her Matilda, which is kind of an old-timey name.
I wanted to name my daughter Matilda. That was the name that I chose. I was like, when I have a daughter, she's going to be named Matilda. And my wife is like, no, you're not going to do that. And now it's a cool name. I was saying this way back. I was saying this 20 years ago. Right?
So you have triplets, I read.
I do.
I can't. I have one, and I cannot. You're automatically outnumbered right out of the gates.
Yeah. It's weird. But obviously, as a new parent, you don't know anything. So I didn't know that there was any difference between 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
I'm like, okay, you got 3, right? There's 2 of us, right? We're doing 1.5 times the work that we normally do. But I was wrong. Obviously, it doesn't work out that way. Once you're a parent, you realize it's, a lot more work than you think.
Oh, it's so crazy. I just, and it's funny, I like the work more than I thought I would, but it is just, I was talking to a friend and he was saying people just really have no idea how much effort goes into having kids.
It's one of those things, when you turn 18, how everyone goes to you and go, how does it feel to be 18? And you're like, it feels like the same way that I did the day before, right? When you get married, they're like, oh my God, you got married. Do you feel any different? At least for men, you're like, no, I had a party and then I'm with the same woman that I was with the day before.
Right.
But when you have a baby, that is the first time that your life is completely, absolutely, fundamentally different, and it's never going back.
Yeah.
So it's that's the one time that you can ask someone, how do you feel? Because it really is that's really a transformational stage in your life.
I feel like it's interesting. My husband was just talking about this last night. One of his coworkers had a baby, and he said you can sense that shift that occurred in him. And I had a C-section. So when you have a C-section, the man often cuts the umbilical cord. And she was with him first before even me, because, they're putting me back together. And I think his coworker had a similar experience, but he was saying you could just sense that shift that occurred the minute that they saw the baby. And I feel like with men, I think women, because, we're pregnant for so long, we have a lot more time to get our minds around it. It's already affecting our life from the minute we're pregnant. You can't do a lot of things. You're uncomfortable. You're feeling the baby. So it's not so, I feel like with men, there's something that happens that really, when they see the baby, it's like, oh, I'm a dad.
You're so right. I mean, it's a big change. But then it's also like, then the weird thing is like, then they give you the baby and they're like, okay, here, take the baby.
I know.
Leave the hospital. And you're like, is someone gonna like talk me through, like explain something to me? They're like, nah, you figure it out. Take it.
And you do.
And you're like, that. Yeah, right. But that first night, you're like, oh my God, like, what if the baby stops breathing? What if like
I'm still like that. I mean, I know mothers who are like, I have teens and I still make sure they're breathing at night sometimes. The first night I remember was tough. She was crying, and looking back, I think it was because I don't think she was fed enough. Because my milk hadn't fully come in yet. So it came in like that we got discharged pretty early, even considering that I had a C-section. So I don't know. She was just crying. And my husband ended up being like the baby whisperer. And my dog was so distressed. She didn't know what the sound was. And she was just walking around whimpering, and I'm, unable to really help in the way I want to, and crying in bed. It's just such a shit show.
Right.
But I can't.
That's the other thing too. Like, most people don't realize, especially if the woman has a C-section, like she's really out of commission. That's a very serious surgery. It's not like you can just like get back to it for like at least a week or so. She can't even walk. Right?
No,
like,
you can walk. They want you to kind of right away. But you're not. The hardest thing is lifting yourself up and lifting babies and rolling over any kind of. I underestimated actually how serious of a surgery it was. Right. But again, I say this, and this is only one. I cannot imagine this times 3.
Oh, it was awful. The worst part is like when you have 3. Like you have to feed them, especially early on. You're feeding them every like 3 hours or whatever it is.
2 hours. Yeah.
Right. The problem is they didn't have similar feeding schedules. Right. So you would feed one, and then you'd feed the other, and then you would feed the third, and then you're back to feeding the first, and then the second. And it was literally for the entire day, you're just feeding babies.
Yeah. And changing them. I can't. My best friend just had twins like 3 months before me. And I was like, I don't know how you're doing this, because I could barely manage one. But then again, I think of when I was reading your stories and some of the stuff, I was like, triplets? That seems extra crazy.
Yeah. My wife, she bared the bigger brunt of it, but it was nuts.
And
I don't know how we got through it.
You just do, and it's so fast. Everyone tells me that it doesn't feel fast at the time, but then after 3 months, you start to get a rhythm. They start to come online.
This is your first. I gotta say, like, what happens is this is my view of kind of what happens. So in the beginning, you're like, oh my God, this is so terrible, and then by about 3, 4, 5 months or so, you figure out a way to adjust your schedule to kind of like get it. So you're like, okay, this is manageable again. Mm-hmm. And then they go through a change, and then it's like, oh my God, this is awful. And then you kind of like figure it out.
I know.
And then they go through another change. You're like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? So you still have 2 more like phases. You have like the toddler.
Moving.
Like,
she just started really moving.
Oh, that's the worst, because it's like, okay, she could kind of stand and she could kind of walk, but then she could also like fall down and crack her head. So I got to like stay on top of her. So that's like a phase that you go through.
Well, she's not like a house plant anymore. That
was the best part, right? Like you could just like you're like working, you take her in the baby bassinet, walk her around.
Yeah.
You want to go to the store, no big deal. Right.
Yeah. Now it's like
it's about to change, and not for the better.
No, she's definitely like a menace to society now. It's fun, but it is like we had to get a big baby pen. It takes up our whole living room. I don't want her to feel like a prisoner, but we have a very old home that we rent, and it has the heaters in the floor. And I don't know what it is about babies. They just know whatever is the most dangerous thing for them to go towards. That's what they gravitate. Great. It's like, cords plugged in? Perfect.
Right.
That's what I want.
Isn't it so great? Like we're all a part of this club. We didn't even know that this club existed, right? Like, but now we're over here and we're able to like commiserate together on this whole thing.
It's funny too. I felt like such a POS when I first had my baby, when I first had her. And I, even through pregnancy, I have like a huge family, lots of cousins, and they've all had kids. And I know they've told me their stories, and I know that they've talked about all this stuff, and I never listened. I was just whatever.
I'm so with you. I had no idea about any of this stuff. And then it's like, you know what the one thing is, like my mom would tell me, and my mom, she's from Africa, so she'll tell me like all kinds of like weird old wives' tales. She'll be like, feed the baby like 2 pears and like a peach, and then they'll solve it. And so she would tell me all the time, I'm like, Mom, that does not work. I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to do all this other stuff. But every once in a while, they'd be like these things like constipation or whatever. And she'd tell me like, give them 2 peaches or whatever. And it works. I'm telling you. So when your mom tells you stuff, and even though it sounds as ridiculous as it's going to sound, do it. And it works. Or, so long as it's not dangerous or anything like that, obviously not that. But like some of the stuff that she would tell me to do, I was like, oh my God, this works. And then, one time after she would tell me that stuff, then we started going to like a doctor that was more like natural. And the doctor was telling us the same stuff.
Wow.
Like, oh my God, my mom was saying that. And I thought this was like some old crazy like African stuff, but it works.
I mean, I guess it's probably just like thousands of years of experience and not having the benefit of, just putting some medication on it. I mean, the miracle of breast milk, I didn't know. Breast milk fixes everything. It's like
it does.
All the moms were like, put breast milk on it. Oh, is something wrong with her skin? Put breast milk on it. Oh, her eye is crusty. Put breast milk in it. And it does. Like breast milk is like a magical potion.
And, I don't know if she's still drinking breast milk, but if you have like extra, because you're probably pumping and you probably have extra, you could sell it too. And like it goes at a premium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I feel like I would rather give it away. I mean,
or give it away.
It's
right?
so,
like you can do that too.
It's tough out there. I don't have, a lot of help. I'm trying to balance this all by myself, but that's also, I want to, I realize how, quick this is. And as much as when I'm cleaning up after the disaster that is eating at this phase 3 times a day, I'm like, oh, I totally get why people have nannies and stuff. I do want to do this stuff with her. And she was kind of a miracle child and probably our only one. And
good for you.
So
our kids, it was a similar thing too.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be. And
that's crazy. And then you had 3.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. I love these stories. Yeah. So I'm excited to see all of it, but it is a little bit overwhelming at times.
But it's all worth it. And the thing is, when I was leaving the hospital, there was a guy and he already had a couple of kids. And I was just like, he saw the look on my face. I was like, oh my God. He was like, dude, look, 50% of the population of a male 50% population men do this.
Yeah.
Like, you can do this. It's not that hard if like 3.5 billion men can do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just take a deep breath. You'll get through it. Don't do anything stupid. And, on the other side, you'll be fine.
That is and why, though, I'm a single issue voter now. That was kind of my original point is I'm choosing to do this and I have some ability to and some help, but I can't imagine like how a single mom or father does this. I do not understand how you do this and you're working and going to school. It just seems so overwhelming. And in this country, people are going back like at 6 weeks. When you actually experience what it's like at 6 weeks with the baby and yourself, you're like, this is not right. This seems unfair to make people go back to work in 6 weeks. Right. That's the best we can give them.
About, even if you go back in 6 weeks and then now you have to worry about paying for childcare. Childcare is not expensive. I mean, that's the biggest expense that most families have in their household, even sometimes more than rent, right? Like, so you're kind of like, we've got to, if we're, people want to talk about like family values, taking care of families. And I think on, whether you're liberal, conservative, whatever, I think everyone feels that way. But let's kind of provide the support, or think about providing the support that you need if you're going to, raise a bunch of healthy children.
Yeah, what does that look like? I feel it's like everything, though. I feel like so much lip service is given to it, and then I just don't see actual solutions or anything really changing or getting better, which is why I throw my hands up and I'm like, you're all crazy. I want to talk to you about why we're talking, which is just your amazing story of being an entrepreneur, which, I started this podcast back in 2018 because I felt like there's just this very victimhood vibe in the country right now. And I didn't want to create another podcast where it was just a bunch of people talking about victimhood or how victimhood is in the culture, or it becomes like this loop. I just wanted to hear stories from people of overcoming hardship and resilience, and entrepreneurs I love because I've started a company and failed fantastically and continue to get back up. And you have started many companies, and now you founded Media Takeout, which is let's talk about gossip. Let's talk about the gossip
Let's
world.
do that. Let's talk.
Yeah. So let's start with Media Takeout, and we'll kind of work backwards.
Yeah. So I started Media Takeout in 2006 after starting a bunch of companies before. Both of them. First one was a dramatic failure. The second one was not so much. It was, maybe some people might have not considered it a failure because I made a little bit of money out of it, but certainly wasn't what I expected out of it. And then Media Takeout was the third. And I think it's important that, to really have a positive outlook, and then you have to as an entrepreneur. And not because it's going to help motivate people or whatever else. It's because you're going to deal with so many failures that I think a lot of people, when they deal with a lot of failures, they're like, oh my God, I can't do anything right. And what I do is I deal, and right now, and we've been really successful and really blessed. We have 35 million people on the site and everything's going great. But you make a bunch of decisions on the course of a day. You decide, hey, let's invest to do this, go into this growth opportunity, and it doesn't work. And most of the stuff that you do doesn't work. But you have to look on the bright side of everything, right? Like you say, okay, this didn't work and we spent a lot of money and we lost a lot of money on this, but what did we learn in this situation? And there's always something that you learn from it. And, I always start thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I just had to, that money that we invested that disappeared was really just paying for that lesson that we learned. And over the course of kind of your career, you put together a lot of those lessons. Even though you have a lot of failures, you have a lot of lessons.
Yes.
And you don't make it, the trick is just not making the same mistake twice.
That's so true.
Making a mistake is fine. It's not doing that. And so after the first company, we made every mistake in the book. Probably the biggest one is just going into becoming an entrepreneur for entrepreneur's sake, and just trying to chase money at the end, right? My goal was not to create a product. My goal was not to create a company. My goal was just to figure out a way to raise money and get an exit and get money and get out. Didn't matter what the business was, what ended up, whatever. I didn't care. I had no interest. And that was kind of my entire focus on it. And obviously it didn't go well. The weird thing is when something like that doesn't go well, here I was 23 years old, 24 years old, fresh out of business school. Everyone knew that I was going into this business. And so everyone was like, oh my God, Fred is going to be this great entrepreneur. And then it didn't work. And so I had to go back and visit and see all of these people that I knew that knew I was successful or thought I was successful. And I had to walk by them. And basically they knew that I had failed, and I knew that I had failed, and I had to put my tail between my two legs and kind of go on. And that was probably one of the most humbling times in my life, where you just really feel like you're a loser in this.
Yeah.
But then you got to pick yourself back up. You have to say, you deal with that, and obviously, whatever comes along with that. And then you say, okay, great, it didn't work out. What did I learn in this? and you have to take a real look at yourself, right? Like, don't pretend, or
Yeah.
you did something wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, forget about all the other, a lot of other stuff went wrong, but what did you do wrong, and what did you learn about what you did wrong that you could get better at? And that's what I learned about myself on that. I was like, I went into this thing for all the wrong reasons. Like, I wasn't trying to make a company. I wasn't trying to make a product. I wasn't trying to make anything. I didn't even care about what it was. Like, there was certain pieces of the company, I didn't even care what it did. I was just like, oh, it's raising money. Okay, fine. Let's just continue to do it. You know what I mean?
Just a means to an end.
Right. But then when things go wrong, you don't know about what the company is, whatever, because you're focusing on things in the wrong way. And so I was like, that's one mistake I'm never going to make again. So the second business, I didn't make that mistake, but I made a whole bunch of other mistakes. And then you learn from that. And then the third business, I had like an entire laundry list of what not to do. And they're personal to me, right? Like, I can tell you what they are. And for you, you might be like, okay, I would never make that mistake. And maybe you wouldn't. So it's one of those situations. It's one of those situations that you can't really tell anyone. I couldn't sit down and say, okay, these are the 10 different things, right? Because a lot of them are tied to my personality, tied to who I am, tied to maybe my own insecurities or whatever, that lead me to do this. And maybe you have an entirely different laundry list of stuff. So it's one of those grinds that you kind of have to go through. It's a personal thing. You go through it. And over time, if you stay with it, you'll get out on the other side. Or you won't, right? Or you'll just say, you know what, this is not worth it. Let me kind of go another route.
Or I mean, I learned so much from my first bankruptcy. And I too started my company, I think I was probably 25, but I had no business school. I kind of had the opposite. I had a huge vision. I knew what my product was. I knew why. That was really what motivated me to start it. And then I ended up having zero business acumen whatsoever. I didn't have a business plan. It was bound to fail. I was completely disorganized. I had no other people's money. I spent my own money. And by 28 years old, I was filing for bankruptcy, and it was a massive failure. And I've been doing all these writing prompts on my Substack. We're doing like a daily writing prompt, and writing prompts are a trip because they just bring up things you didn't even know were in your brain. And a lot of the stuff that's been coming up is that time and what I learned from that massive failure. And I was like, I will never spend more than I can actually, pay for with my company. I can't just be like spending beyond what I'm making.
You know, the interesting thing is you really will never do that again, right? Like, there's everyone else. And the thing is, the wild thing was that I was making mistakes because I went to business school. So I knew what you shouldn't do. Even though I knew, I was still making those mistakes, right? And like, if I look back and say like what mistakes I did, and if I were to tell you right now, you'd be like, you went to business school and you didn't know. It was like, your costs are too high, right? Like your costs were too high as compared to your revenue. The revenue wasn't growing like it should, right? Like, they were elementary mistakes, but when you're in the mix of this, right? Like it's like things are flying at your head, right? Like you're just trying to stay alive. You're like, oh my God, I need a customer. I have no customers. All right, I'll pay for a customer, right? At some point, you do whatever you can. You cut whatever corners to kind of make it work. And the next thing you know, you're like, oh my God, I'm making the dumbest mistakes that I ever did.
I was just delusional. I mean, that's one of the things I've really had to confront is like how and recognize I'm still delusional in some respects. You have to be to start a company. You've got to be somewhat delusional. And I always say, the difference between delusional and dreams is like hard work, but also really my cousin, who is my producer, and she's been like a partner in my company forever. And we like die laughing thinking about we call them the days of soup and toast because we had no money. And we would go into Costco, and I was massively in debt, couldn't pay any of my bills, but I'm like, I have $700 left on this credit card. Let's spend it on whiteboards at Costco. And we're like, what were we thinking? Why did we need those whiteboards? I needed like a business plan. I didn't need to be spending more money. And we die laughing about just how delusional we were. And I know even now, because it's the second iteration of the company again. And I just recently dealt with a mistake that I'm like, I want to blame everyone else for this. This is the other thing, but the buck has to stop with me. Even though I can blame my accountant, even though the city of Los Angeles is literally a thug that just shakes people down for like the mafia for money, I have to take responsibility for my part in this mistake. And it keeps me up at night. Like that kind of mistake keeps me up at night staring at the ceiling.
It's good that it does keep you up at night. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. That's the only thing that stops us from like making these mistakes. All right, like the true fear and the remembering of the pain that you felt when you did this. Right, like there's things that like sometimes right now, because now the businesses are in two totally different stages. And people will say, hey, they'll come to me with an opportunity. And I'll be like, oh my God, that's the mistake that I made in 2006, right? Like, no, right? Like, I'm not even going down that road. I'm not discussing it. I don't even give it 2 seconds of my mind. And these are sometimes you'll see mistakes that the entire industry will be doing this mistake. And everyone will be like, okay, this is what you need to do. And I'll be like, dudes, you don't remember, you don't know what that feels like. You're about to find out, but I know what it feels like already. I have those scars.
Those wounds.
Yeah.
And they're self-inflicted a lot most of the time. And that's why it keeps me up at night. It's just like, are you kidding me?
It's all self-inflicted, right? Because at the end of the day, I was talking to my wife and we were talking about different things. And I was like, because so many people, now people talk to me about entrepreneurs and they're like, oh my God, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be my own boss. I want to be an entrepreneur because there's so much financial, like that's how you make the money. You make so much more money being an entrepreneur than going elsewhere. And all of that may be true, but that's not the way that I look at it. I mean, one, even if at the end, maybe you're going to be making more money, you're going to make no money for a lot of time. And then the whole being your own boss thing, I don't think I've ever been my own boss. Like in a lot of ways, I am the lowest man on the totem pole over here, right? Like, everyone could call in sick one day all at once. And that means I can't call in sick that day, right? Like literally, if everybody said, okay, I'm not coming in, that would mean that I am literally doing the jobs of everybody here. Yeah. Because I am the low man on the totem pole, right? Like the high man on the totem pole would be like, I'm not going into work today. And they can do that, right? And they'll still get paid. I can't do that.
No.
I have got to show up. If someone doesn't show up or whatever else, or something needs to be done, I'm the only one that 100% has no excuse for not showing up at anything. And things come up, things happen, and then at the end of the day too, is like they do their job and then they go home, right? Like that, they do it and then they're like, okay. And that was always like a big thing for me because it was like I almost felt like jealous. I'm like, listen, I am putting in all this work. Why aren't you putting in all this work? And the answer is because this isn't my company. This is just my job. I'm going to do my work and then I'm going to go home. I got a date. I got whatever. See you tomorrow.
It's so true.
And then I'm like, okay, now I got to pull an all-nighter because this person wants to go out on a date and they don't realize I'm putting on an all-nighter. Don't they understand my feelings?
Yeah.
Right? And you're kind of in on that. And
my husband's great. He, I can definitely kind of martyr myself on the altar of I don't you know the sacrifices, and he's like, get down off the cross, we need the wood. I think it's good to have people who can gently and lovingly call you out on your, it's just a defect of character of mine where I know that it's like no one can do this but me, and no one can, but I'm choosing to do it. And again, I see this victim vibe. It's so insidious because it's so seductive. It's like I can just easily be. It will soothe my anxiety and the psychological suffering I might be in at the moment. But it doesn't ultimately fix any of the problems that I have to face or any of the mistakes. We were joking the other day because I tweeted something like I came to a realization it's not the algorithm, I just suck. Because we're always talking about how on YouTube we're like, we're being oppressed. It's the algorithm. And I'm like, Or we need, these plateaus I think are so great because it forces you to really dig down deep into all of your processes, all of your systems. What can we do differently? If you're just exponentially exploding, you don't have to do that kind of detail work and really look at what's working, what isn't working. Maybe there are things we can change about our YouTube show that will make it more friendly to YouTube and not like a show that should be on TV that we're putting on YouTube. It's
right. I mean, the thing about it too is it's like, you always see the exponential growth, right? Like you look at Mr. Beast, you'd be like, oh, Mr. Beast, the story is, oh, he showed up one day, turned on a camera, and next thing you know, he had 100 million views, right?
Right.
His story would sound just like ours, right? Like, oh my God, there was this plateau. I didn't know. Didn't know what I was going to do. And somehow I like worked through it, and a series of hard work and luck and right place, right time got me to another, got me through that. And then I was at a different one, right? And then the same thing happened. And then, you know what I mean? That's the real story. No one really wants to hear that story because it's like the story of how do you lose weight? Well, you can eat less and go to the gym more. That's the real answer, but nobody wants to hear that. So how about a bunch of pills? I got the perfect diet. I got the perfect exercise, right? And so you can go on and on, 1,000 YouTube videos and all that other stuff. The answer is kind of right in front of your face, like what you need to do. But it's not as fun, not as sexy.
No, it's not as sexy. Definitely. Just the day in, day out, I'm very much goal oriented, but I think something I've learned so much from my husband is he's like systems, not goals. And there's this great quote from the guy who wrote Atomic Habits, and I'm just having a brain fart on his name right now, James Clear. And he always says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, which I love.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm more like your husband. I think more in systems. My wife she's kind of like you. She's like, yeah, she just has a dream and she'll be like, this is where we need to go.
Yep.
And let's figure out a way to get there. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, but how do you figure out the way? I don't know how to get the way there. So why don't we just move the goal? She's like, no. This is kind of where we need to go.
She's like me. We're like, to the moon. Yeah. And my husband's like, exactly. How is this going? It's like that South Park where the underpants gnomes are like, steal underpants. And then it's like profit. No plan in between.
I think that's always the perfect together. That's the perfect team because like exactly what she needs more of what I have and I need more of what she has. And it's like, so when you put that together, you really go, right? Because then she's going to force me to figure out a system to get to her goal. And if I didn't have that goal, I'd come up with a system to get to somewhere a lot lower, right? So it's when you think about it like that, that's kind of how these things work. And whether it's a marriage or like just a team, I think you want to have people like that on there to just kind of balance everything.
Definitely. It's good to know where your weaknesses are. My cousin is so organized and she, manages like our books and she loves spreadsheets, which she's like, there's just something about a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. I was like, okay, this is not something I relate to. Look at my desktop. It will give you anxiety. And it's a nice balance. And she's much more kind of methodical and we need to get one project. I have a million ideas a day and I want to do them all and she'll slow me down. But I also have a sense of timing where I'm like, we need to start this now. So let's find a balance. The time I have I'll push for things maybe sooner just so because I have just an innate sense of timing when things should get going. So I think it's nice to have that creative balance too. Why did you start Media Takeout?
I think I kind of fell into it. I mean, I'd done 2 different businesses. The first business was a telecommunications company. The second business was a laundry service.
Okay.
So the third was a media company, right? Like it was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess I always figured I wanted to do something real. I didn't want to just kind of create a company for the sake of being a company. And I wanted to do something that I thought would actually provide value to the people. Looking for a hole in the market and just really being able to do something that would be significant. And that was always kind of the way I looked at it. Not just iterate on something that's existing out there and do it a little bit better and maybe increase the margins or whatever. It was more so just saying, look, there's so much stuff that should be done out here in the world that just isn't. And the reason why it isn't is just because there's no other reason other than nobody's doing it. And so why don't I just find these areas, and most people in their mind, the part of the reason why we started laundry services, I worked in a company where you had to be business casual, but I worked a lot of hours. And so I realized, I'm sending my laundry out to the wash and fold place. And then I would send my dry cleaning out to the dry cleaning place. And I was like, it just seemed inefficient. I'm like, okay, I got to have this bag for the laundry and then this bag for the dry cleaning. And like, how do I figure out? And then this is coming back on Tuesday. This is coming back on Wednesday. Like, why doesn't the guy just take the whole thing? And so that was the purpose of the whole laundry service. It was just like, I knew it wasn't just me. There was, 50,000 people that work in office jobs around New York City, like me, that feel the same way. And I also knew that the person who's running the wash and fold is not working in an office. And so he doesn't even know that this problem exists. And the same thing with the dry cleaning person.
Right.
So I was like, hey, why don't I just solve a problem for me and the people like that are in my situation? And I counted them up and then, we figured out a market analysis and like, there's a real market here. Let's go into this business. And that's what we did. We started, I had no idea. I probably had done like 5 loads of laundry in my life before we started that business, which was kind of crazy. Looking back at it, to be young and dumb. Right?
To be young and delusional.
So I was like, we're going to go into this business, but I think I did it right. I was like, we hired a consultant who worked at like FedEx and we had like operations down.
Wow.
And we got the right people. So we were like, okay, we're going to do this right. And we did it. And there was a ton of operational issues with laundry that I'm sure your audience is probably not all that interested in. But suffice it to say, after about a year, we'd grown the business fairly well in terms of customers, but the costs were through the roof. And so in order for us to kind of do it the right way, we had to spend a ton of money just doing a complete overhaul on our operations.
Wow.
And that meant going out and raising like $50 million. Wow. And a whole bunch of other stuff. Now we were in a position that we probably could have done it. And it was me and my wife at the time. We were partners. Well, she wasn't my wife then. She's my wife now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like we were both looking at her. And the thing that like kills me is that we had proven that there was a real audience, a real market for this. And so the number one dry cleaner in the city approached us and he was like, I want to buy your business. It wasn't for a lot of money, but it was for a reasonable amount. But I knew that he didn't want to buy our business. He just wanted to buy it and then just shut it down because he knew that we were going to be his real competitor going forward. And so he made the offer and like I had to talk to my wife. I was like, what do we do? Do we like go out and raise this incredible amount of money and basically commit ourselves to this laundry business for the rest of our lives? Or do we take this like meaningful, but not like life-changing amount of money? And she was just like, I don't want to do this. I mean, I could tell you that the laundry business, I know people tell you restaurant business is tough. I know there is no business that's tougher than the laundry business. Maybe like, I don't know. I can't think of one.
Wow. Yeah. I would imagine. I just hate laundry in general. I can't. My husband is a gem and takes care of that for us because he doesn't mind it. And even you talking about this, I'm like, I bet this is just logistically, it sounds like a nightmare. In general, it just seems, I would not want to do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so it would mean like I'm talking about like plants and conveyor belts and stuff. That was going to be my life. Like,
yeah,
a damn factory. Right?
Yeah, chemicals.
Yeah, right. I mean, the chemicals and the washing part is not the hard part. The hard part is like someone gives you a bag of clothes, you have to like split it up, right? Like the whites go here, and the darks go here, the laundry goes here, the dry cleaning goes there, and then you got to like put it all back together.
Yeah,
without losing any of it. So that's kind of the thing. So we ended up, my wife was like, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to be like living in a factory for the rest of my life. So she was like, take the money and let's go. And so we did it. And the thing, even to this day, that burns me is that now this is, I guess, 16 years later, and no one has like completely like jumped on that idea that we took. And that idea is 1000% a $10 billion idea. I know it's a $10 billion idea. I know someone will make $10 billion and will be sitting on the Forbes list off of that idea. I know it.
Could you do it now?
I don't know if I could live in a factory. I mean, I'm telling you that you got to be ready to go down that road. And that's a long road to go down. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I can do it.
And so then did you take that and then start will you describe Media Takeout for my audience, for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, so Media Takeout is a celebrity news and celebrity gossip site. The best way to think about it is it's sort of like TMZ. They're probably our main competitor. We focus primarily on African-American and urban celebrities, NBA players, rappers, and just basically telling the gossip around their romantic lives and the like. And we've been doing this now for 16 years. And we have 35 million people a month on the site. So
that's awesome. Was it just a hole in the market? It just nobody was covering like black gossip? Black celebrity gossip?
It just wasn't there.
That's crazy.
At the time, I mean, the gossip blogs had just kind of come out. So maybe there were like 10 or 12 of them out there, but they were all covering the same celebrities, and they just, for one reason or another, and I don't even know that there was any reason for it other than it's just people were just covering who they liked, right? Like, so there would be like a woman that was interested in country music, so she just covered like country music. So she had like the country music star blog,
right?
And then there was like a bunch of people that were interested in just pop star blogs.
The best one ever was "What Would Tyler Durden Do?" Did you ever?
Oh yeah, he was great.
That was the best freaking. Yeah. I think he ended up selling it, but that was just the greatest. And then the one that kind of took its place afterwards was Siri's Burn List. Did you ever see that one?
No, I don't remember that. It's all
child celebrity gossip from the perspective of Tom Cruise's child Siri. And she's just like throwing shade at all of these other celebrity children. I don't know if it even exists anymore, but that one was around for a while. But yeah, you're right, actually. The I guess 2006, is that when you started it?
Yeah.
So that was really when they all kind of started then. That was when I first started obsessively reading What Would Tyler Durden Do?
And you know how I even got into that is that when we had the laundry service, we were advertising on blogs because most of our audience was like young, female, professional. And so we were like, we got to advertise on these things called blogs. And so, but no one was advertising on them. No one even knew that they had advertising. So like we would go to some of the blogs, like we would advertise. I think we were like Perez Hilton's first advertiser. We were on like Gothamist and a bunch of others. And what we would do sometimes is they'd be like, I don't even know how to like do an ad. And so I'd be like, okay, well, we'll hire a developer and like put an ad on your site. And they'd be like, okay. And I'd be like, I pay you like $500 to do it. And they'd be like, all right, $500, like that's $500, $500 more than I had this morning. And you'll hire a developer to like put it on there. And they'd be like, yeah. And so we'd hire a developer and we would put an ad on their site. But that was the best idea for us because we could like put it anywhere we want. We put it like as big as we can right in the front. Right? But then they caught on and then they would do it. And then by the time we had sold the business, so I think we were Perez Hilton. We're not his first advertiser. We were like his second advertiser.
Yeah.
And by the time we had sold the business, and this is now like only like 8 months later, the same ad that we were looking at that he was basically giving us for whatever number we came out of our head, like maybe like $200-300, was going for like $50,000.
Wow.
This is in like 8 months time.
Crazy.
So I was like, what? And so no one knew this, right? Like, because everyone just saw an ad on there. They had no idea, right? And literally no one, not people in the industry, not, whatever. The only people that would have known are people that would have actually inquired to advertise, which was us. So I was like one of these very, very few people that knew that these blog things that everybody thought was like just something that people were like doing in their backyard or in their mother's basement was literally able to bring in $50,000 for one ad.
That's so crazy.
I was like, oh my God, this is the business I got to be in. After like, trolling through underwear and, and dirty socks, I was like, no, that's the game I need to be in.
Yeah.
I'm sitting behind a computer in a luxury chair, leaning back, blogging, and making $50,000 a month.
Wow.
So that's where I was like, that's what I got to do. And so when we sold the business, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this blogging thing.
Wow.
And I knew a lot of the people too, because I was their advertiser. So I'd be like,
right.
Hey, I'm going to be in this blog. Can you link to me? And they'd be like, okay.
Wow. And then you just filled the hole that you saw in the market.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was also, I was more interested in African-American celebrity gossip, celebrities. So I'd want to talk about them. So a lot of it was natural. And then there was also this hole in the market that I was like, oh my God, there's this gigantic hole in the market. What if we go in there and fill it? And so it was just like, everything kind of came about. Right. But like, so it's kind of like just shows kind of the story, right? Like I committed 100% to this laundry service, right? Like I was 100% into it. I was really, really bummed that, that I missed out on this great opportunity. It seemed like it was like cut short, and it just opened up this entirely new thing that I had no idea that I was going to walk into, that totally changed my life. It's fantastic. Like, lifestyle wise, this is the best job that I ever had by far. I've been incredibly successful, blessed. I wouldn't have written it any other way than the way it went.
I love that. It reminds me when you're talking of that, I think it was a Steve Jobs, you can't connect the dots looking forward. It was a commencement speech he gave. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. Every single mistake.
Like, you don't even think, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't even think about it. You're like, so much so that if sometimes if you look at your life, it's almost like there's a pattern going on there, and you're wondering like, what, like if it's almost like pre-planned, there's a pattern going on there, and you just kind of see it, and someone on the outside could see it, and sometimes you're so into it you can't even see it. Sometimes you'll talk to like your mom or like your aunt, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I saw that in you all the time. You're like, I never saw that in myself.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I saw it. It was always there. You're just so. I knew you were going to do this or that or whatever.
Were you into gossip? Is that something that I just love, I'll talk to my therapist and I'll be like, oh, one of the things I want to fix is like gossiping. And she's like, it's very human. Right. She's like, it's very human.
Look, it's totally human. And the thing about it is so many times I'll talk to people, especially men, and they'll go, oh, I'm not into gossip. And I'll be like, okay. But like today's the NBA trade deadline. And if you talk to any men, they'll be like, oh, so-and-so might be getting traded to the Lakers and so-and-so might be traded. I'll be like, how do you know that? Well, I heard about it. Somebody said they heard it from a brother or whatever. This is gossip, right? Like it's just, the question isn't whether or not we like to gossip. The question is, what is it that you want to gossip about? Is it about sports? Is it about people's romance? Is it about business? Is it about whatever? But the concept of what it is that we're talking about, it's so innately human that I don't know that people can kind of get away from it. I mean, I like to say, like, I don't care what's going on in the world. You could, if you went back and you could, decipher the hieroglyphics on the pyramids, you're going to see a lot of gossipy stuff on there,
That's amazing. Do you get criticized for it being, do you get any criticisms for being in the like gossip industry, or maybe, I don't know, things have changed so much since, for the better and also for the weirder since like George Floyd. So I hear from stories from my friends, and they tell me, like, for instance, he's a like black television creator, and he's writing this cartoon. It's like a comedy, and they didn't want to give him any notes on the comedy, and they hired somebody black to come in and give this guy notes because they felt like he was misrepresenting the black community. And he's like, I can't tell jokes about a perfect family. They have to be human and be flawed and make mistakes. And it was like this huge back and forth. And I think he ended up like walking. But I'm like, this is a black creator who's being like, this is not helping. It's
I mean, I think it's a lot of it is hard because at the end of the day, I mean, from my perspective, and just thinking about it, forgetting about me for a second, as an entrepreneur, I'm producing a product that the public has to like and has to consume.
Right.
And then there's a lot of levels to that. And I think a lot of times people don't really truly appreciate the different levels to it. One level of that is it has to be interesting, right? Another level of it is it has to be respectful, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not just trying to get you to, click on the site once and then, get your ad dollars and then go away and never see you again. I want you to come back. I want you to have a good experience. I want you to enjoy yourself here, right? And there's a lot into what that means in order to make them have a good experience. Part of it is, being funny. Part of it is being respectful, not saying, something that's clearly disrespectful to them. But part of them is also taking into account their feelings and what it is, the general feeling in the world today. And that could be completely different than the way this is before. And like I said, I'm not talking about it politically or anything. This is just business. Right?
Yeah.
Business. So you have to do that, right? Like you have no choice but to really just truly respect your audience. Because if you don't, and take what they're saying, and if they feel away, let's say whatever it is, whether you think it's ridiculous or not, doesn't matter, right? Like that's the way that they feel. This is the way that they have decided that this is what society is going to look like. And if you want to continue to serve them, this is what you're going to have to do. And that's what you have to do. And that is the way that I operate, right? Like now the end result of that is going to look like me just doing a lot of things that I think, maybe the public actually says, hey, we kind of like that, right? Like, but more to, I guess your initial question was kind of like, just like, how do you deal with stuff going on and the changes in the world, the changes in kind of how people view things like gossip. And the answer would be that there's a way to do it because people still like gossip, but there's a way to do it that the people will be okay with.
Right.
And it's your job as the business owner, like I said, forget all the politics stuff over there. There's plenty of reasons to come out on one way or the other on this. I'm just talking business. As a business owner, it is your job to figure out what it is that they want, figure out how to say it in a way that is not going to offend them and that they're going to appreciate it and they're going to feel comfortable and they're going to be happy. And your job is to give them that.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, that seems that's how I have to kind of approach things as well. It's always hard when you have an audience, and I think with comedy it's challenging. I guess I think that even with like our YouTube show will always be joking, like we're making burgers out of your sacred cow. So we hope people are expecting that, but still we're always shocked at the number of people when it's like you touch on their thing that they're like, right. Da, da, da.
Well, and the other side of it is, right, like you're never going to be able to please everyone, right? Like, so there's going to be a thing, but there's a general kind of world ethos that's there. And the other thing too is sometimes you misjudge things and you get it wrong, right? And when you do, if you've kind of built this kind of trust with your audience, you just come out and you say, listen, we screwed up. We didn't know, we did this wrong, and you address it, you kind of go about it. There's a lot of times I find so many people get into trouble because they just dig their heels in and then they're like, I'm going to make a stand. This is political. I'm like, it's not political. You know what I mean? You're not a politician, right? Like, what are you talking about, right? Like, there are people that have like, they like you and they're offended by what you did, right? Like think if it was like your family member, like your brother or whatever, right? Like you said something and you truly offended him, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if maybe he shouldn't have been offended, right? Like you're not going to say, well, I have the freedom of speech to offend you, right? Like you just be like, dude, listen, I'm sorry. We're not talking politics over here. We're trying to have fun. We're trying to have a good time. I'm sorry I said something that like got you out of that zone. Let's get back into the zone and let's get back to what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like enjoying each other. And that's where you want to always take this. I think a lot of times people just feel like they feel attacked. And then, there's always two sides of it, right? So when there's always a side that's kind of egging you on, don't let the woke people get you.
I know.
Don't let
Never
them do that
apologize
to you,
the mob.
Yeah, right. And then when everything goes up in flames for you, they'll be like, okay, goodbye. I'm on to the next one. Right?
Yeah.
So
That's funny too, because I've experienced mobs, and I do think there's a time and a place when you shouldn't bend the knee to the mob. I also think if you feel like you did something wrong, you absolutely should apologize or try and make it right. Or I saw this with Rogan when he came out and he made an apology, and so many people were like, he caved to the mob. I'm like, did it occur to you that this man has agency, that he does not do anything he doesn't want to do, just because he's your guy when he does what you want him to do, and then the minute that he's not doing what you want him to do, he's suddenly like bending a knee to the mob. He might just be doing what he feels is right. And
yeah, I mean, I think,
can't conceive of that.
Right. I think someone like him too, he's under a microscope, right? Like there's plenty of people that just are waiting to kind of figure out, oh, he said this, and blow it out of proportion and whatever else. So, there's only so much apologizing you can do, but these people are out to get you. They're out to get you. They're not gonna stop. So I think that's a little bit different. You gotta, but there are ways to navigate that too, right? Like you gotta just take it back, like, because so much of this, it's hard because these are personal attacks, right? Like they're attacking you personally. Right, like they're saying things about you that aren't true or you don't feel are true, right? Like so you feel like you have to like fight back against it, but that's usually the wrong way to do it. You have to just recognize that these are just people that are just lashing out over like what it is that you said or whatever else. They don't really care about you. You're just kind of like this side, thing for them to get this vent out, and you're just kind of in it. So you're the point should be kind of like, okay, well, let's get the vent off of me. You're going to vent off on somewhere else or somewhere else. And sometimes it could be that, maybe you didn't mean it in a way and whatever else, but you may have actually harmed them. Maybe someone just didn't like it. Maybe there's somebody out there that's a huge fan of yours and they're like, oh my God, she's the greatest. I can't wait to listen to her podcast. I want everything to do with her. And then they hear not even what you said, but they like mistakenly listen to what somebody else said on Twitter or whatever. And then they're like, oh my God, I'm never going to listen to her again. Right?
Yeah.
That happens, right?
A lot.
That's very real, right? So if the whole thing is just to stop that from happening, right? Like this is the big misunderstanding between you and a true person that actually cares about you. There's no need for this fight, especially like there are people that are like, they're built for this fight, right? Like there are people out there that know the arguments, they know the issues, they know the whatever, and they're fighting it, right? Like they're fighting this fight that's out there right now. We're not equipped to get into this, right?
Yeah.
Like let it be, let the professionals handle the professional stuff, let the police solve the crimes.
Yeah.
All right, let me just be over here. I'll call them when I need them.
Yeah, I definitely... I try to really like stay in my lane, which is just making fun of everything. And I have a lot of friends who are in the media space and they're like very engaged in the culture war and they love the fight. They're built for it. And I feel like a divorce, I am a kid of divorce, but I feel that way of like, I just want everyone to get along. I just want... it gives me anxiety when people are fighting. And some people they love it. They're built for trending on Twitter. They're seeking those sound bites that will make them go viral, strategically. And I joke, I hope the only time I trend on Twitter is when I die or something. I don't want to be trending on that site. It's some people are built for it, that fight. And
I agree.
I definitely think like it just must be interesting. The world I was reading an article you did with somebody about just how things change even in the world almost overnight between, March of 2020 and like September of 2020 and how different your industry was, or just even the perception of what you were doing. And that's fascinating to me because you've been doing it. Everything got more and more serious, it seems, over the past couple of years. It was like the aughts were just like gossip and everybody kind of a free-for-all, the Wild West of the internet, and then shit got real.
Yeah, I think that was definitely like a tough time for everyone. I mean, it was a tough time for a bunch of different things, right? Like there was COVID, right? Like destroyed the world. And then the implications of that. I mean, I think a lot of times, especially for our industry, I don't know how it was in yours, but when it happened in COVID, the advertising industry literally shut down. So no one was buying. So that basically said that every media company was bankrupt going as of like March, everyone in the world. And unless this thing like changed. And it was like everyone was just kind of looking at each other like, is this happening? Like, are we all like bankrupt? And then but we have to all just like continue on, like if everything is fine. And then luckily it changed and whatever else. I mean, it's almost felt like, maybe how the financial industry must have felt in 2008 when like Lehman Brothers went down and everyone's like, what's going on? There's no advertising. There's no business, right? So then eventually that started coming back. The industry didn't come all the way back, but there was that. And then there was George Floyd stuff and whatever else. And especially in our industry, it changed, right? Because now we really are about keeping it light and being fun.
Yeah.
And you have like all this heavy stuff coming on.
Yeah.
And the question is kind of like, how do you deal with heavy stuff in this area where you're really just trying to? It's about fun, and and we've done that for a while. Even if sometimes we're talking about serious issues or quasi. I mean, nothing's all that serious in the world of celebrity, right? We try and keep it fun. Like at the end of the day, maybe you might have a smile on your face after the joke, but how do you get a smile on your face after some of this stuff? And so there was always this question about how much of it do you want to cover? How much of it do you not want to cover? How do you cover
Fred,
this? Right?
I totally understand.
And you just don't, you try and like work with it, right?
Yeah.
And how we were able to navigate it is just coming back to like what I told you before, is just like, forget about what I think. Literally forget about what I think. And I try and do that. And my writers obviously forget about what I think. But that is absolutely the way to do it. Forget about what I think. Forget about what any of the writers think. It is 100% about what the audience. What is it that the audience is feeling right now, and what is it that they need right now? And that's what we need to do. And so, a lot of my day now, obviously, we're doing business stuff and podcasts like this, and the boring running of business is what I do most of the day. And then sometimes I'll do some of the like background stuff for some stories, but that's usually not very much time. And then the big block of time that I spend is just trying to figure out what people are thinking and why. Just trying to be like, people are doing this. Like, why are they doing this? Like, why do people like, even like a politician, like, why do people like this politician? Not in complete no judgment, right? Like, even if let's say it's someone like Trump, like, it's not even about whether or not he's good or bad, or they said this or said that. Just like, what is it about this guy that people like? Right? Like as a true like question, and not with no implications to whether it's good or bad.
Right, because they're just a symbol for something. That's all politicians usually are.
Right? But sometimes there's more than that, right? Like, just because what I'm really trying to do is just trying to get into the heads of people, right? There's 50% of the population.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean, is like they're symbolizing they're a symbol for something that lots of people are feeling, that they're representing.
Right. Yeah. And what are those things that he's representing, right? Like, now, if you're a Democrat, they'll tell you a list over here and they're all terrible, right? Like, if you're on the right, they're going to tell you a list over here and they're all great, right? But what is really behind this all, right? Like, there's some degree, some of it has to do with just anxiety, like just general anxiety, not even about anything, right? Like, just a general anxiety. But there's other pieces to it too. And the reason why you do that is because, like, from my standpoint, you want to know what it is out there right now. What is it that's in the air right now? Because that helps you guide towards kind of where you're going to be reporting on and what you're going to do, right? Like, if there is this anxiety out there now, report on things that kind of touch on this anxiety that people are kind of feeling. And it might look nothing like Trump, right? Like, and it wouldn't look anything like that. It could look like, earthquakes out west, right? And it's really just touching the exact same thing. And people are like, oh my God, there's this uncertainty that's kind of happening. I could be in my house and then it could tumble down, right? Like, so that's kind of what I am out here doing. And so because that's just what we do, like, when this happens, you could take a real deep look and really understand what's going on. Instead of not listening to what people are saying, not looking at an article that's telling you what's going on or whatever else, just peeling it all the way down to the raw base human like emotion underneath it all. And then that's where you're playing towards, right? Like you're playing towards that, not the stuff above it.
What are you noticing? Like what trends are you seeing?
I think there's some that just like, some that are just perplexing. Probably the most is just like extremism, and not in the way that I think most people think about it. Most people think about extremism like, oh, you know, some school shooter or some like anarchist that's like throwing grenades, but it's not that. It's just people are not willing to like get to the nuance of anything. It's all like, oh my God, they're the worst in the world, or oh my God, it's the best ever. And like, you choose one of those sides, and anyone that's anywhere to kind of the, you know, that's not right with you is all the way on the other side. And then it kind of gives you this, you feel like this need to like, this kind of moral imperative to do whatever you can against that other side, right? So it could be in anything, right? It could be in politics, right? Like a person says, you know, I think the minimum wage should be $15, and somebody else could be like, I want the minimum wage to be $13. Oh my God, you are such a capitalist. You want the minimum wage to be $13. You know how many children will starve at $13 or whatever. I'm like, I didn't say I wanted it at $2. I said I wanted it at $13. Well, $13, $2, it's the same. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, this is where we are in this.
Yeah.
And like I said, no judgment. I'm not saying this to say like, oh my God, the world is falling apart or whatever. I'm just telling you what it is.
Yeah, you're just observing.
And then I'm just an observation. And then the question is, okay, if that's where the world is, where people are just kind of on there, what is it that people want in that sense, right? Like, and that's like, if you're doing the news, do people want anything in the middle? Right?
No.
Like, do people want anything there, or do you want? Are you supposed to criticize this or whatever? Right? Like that helps you kind of move to this. And like I said, that's the top level, but then it goes even deeper than that, which is just kind of like, why do people feel that way?
Mm-hmm. Why are they digging in?
Right. Why are people doing that? And I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the social media, kind of like, hey, here I am kind of culture, which is, you're really just digging in because you're just like, you know, if you go like this, nobody sees you, right? But you have to be like, hey, you're just literally just waving your arm harder than the other guy is waving his arm, or the other woman. And so if you're both waving your arms, what does that look like in kind of, you know what it looks like on video, but what does that look like in text, on tweets, right? And it looks like this, right? Like this extreme stuff, when all we're really talking about is just people wanting to feel seen, right?
Right.
And then if that's what that is, then like, okay, so now we've gotten like a step deeper. Now let's say, like, how do you write stories to make people feel seen? Which is less so about that, right?
Yeah. I forwarded one of the pieces from there about, I think it was like J-Lo and Ben at the Grammys, and they were fighting, and I was like,
I know, they're totally fighting. And they're like, oh no, we're not fighting. I'm like, trust me, I've been there.
Yeah.
We'll fight when I see one.
Yeah, we all do. That's what's so fun. That's what's so fun about celebrity. It's such a nice escape too. You know, it's like in this world where everything has become so politicized, which is something that I've looked at. My friend last night texted me. She's like, I can't even tweet about ketchup. She made some tweet about, she was like, first they banned straws and then they banned ketchup. She's like, and I can't even get ketchup with my fries now. What the heck? It was like something so dumb. And then everybody was like, well, that's what you get for living in California. All these like political. She was like, I just want to make a joke about ketchup. And it does. That's that's the kind of stuff that we talk about on this podcast, and that as a comedian, it makes, I'm like, is everyone, I made some stupid throwaway remark on Twitter, single parents, you all deserve medals. And then it was like, well, parents who are still together deserve medals. I'm like, I was like, oh my God, you're all autistic. Like, what is happening? You know, what is happening?
It's interesting that you're saying that. I got to say, I have tons of conversations with celebrities, and they all kind of say something similar to what you say. They're always like, oh my God, in the comments, they're saying all these horrible things about me and blah, blah, blah. They all say it to me.
Yeah.
And whenever I look, and then I always go, okay, let me look at the comments and see what they're saying about them. And usually, like, let's say you're a pretty big celebrity, there's like hundreds or thousands of comments. And they'll find the 5 where somebody is saying something about them. And they'll be like, oh my God, you see what this person is saying about me? I'm like, did you see the other 900?
No, I agree with that too. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That are over there. You really have to just try your best, especially once you're a public figure, you're out there, you're saying stuff, to just ignore a certain amount of people, right? Like, you can't ignore it all because people are, telling you stuff. But like, there's always going to be that stuff that's out there that's like, that people that are just going there to press your buttons, they're trying to mess with you, or, So I don't know how many people are saying that. I'm sure there are people that are saying that about that ketchup joke. But you might look at it and you might be like, oh my God, there were like 20 people laughing and 2 people said that California joke, And then you're like, how does this? Because it's just something inherently about it, right? Because you're just so used to people laughing at your jokes, right? So like, if there's an audience and there's a whole bunch of people laughing and one person goes boo, obviously, like, you see that person, right?
It reminds me, I talk about this all the time. When I was pregnant, I was binge watching Frasier for some reason, and there's this just such brilliant writing in that show. And there's this one episode where they do one of those like blind, he was behind the mirror, but they did like a blind, what is it called, where they survey just a bunch of people about his radio show, and everybody loved it except for one guy, and he became obsessed with this one guy. He went to his newsstand, he ended up burning it down accidentally. I was like, I feel so uncomfortable by this episode because I know that is in me, where it's like really the one person who's like, you piece of garbage.
Like I said, I can tell you, I've talked to hundreds of celebrities, and they always tell me the exact same thing. And they always tell me this. And I always say, let's look at the post and let me see it. And then I'm saying, look, there's always like 50x the number of positive posts than there is the negative ones. And they always focus on the negative ones. That's something, like I said, this is just another thing that I observe, right? No judgment, no saying anything about this, just saying like, why is that? Right? Like, why? What is that about us as people? Right? Because celebrities are just people. That, like, when you have all these people saying this stuff about you, and so many people saying positive things about you, and then there's just a few that are saying negative, you can't help but focus on this thing, because like what you're saying to me is a conversation that I have all the time.
Yeah.
And it happens so often that I always say, hey, look, I have these conversations all the time.
Yeah.
So there's something about us as just people. So you shouldn't feel bad about this. I'm sure it's your genetics that are.
I mean, I think too, it's just in our DNA to be, it's probably for our own protection to know when people don't like us. I think there's a lot of science around, we notice we hang on to people who are expressing like anger longer than, because we have to. It's for our own safety. If somebody doesn't like you, that is inherently dangerous to you. Back on the savannah, when you were in tribes, you had to know if somebody had bad intentions for you. And so I do think there's some lizard brain shit going on there, that people notice those things and hang on to them. But I also think it probably has to do with a lot of the way media affects the way we view the world. And probably just ego too, and narcissism, and not everybody is a clinical narcissist, but I think in our culture, you unavoidably become narcissistic just by virtue of putting yourself. Everybody, it is like, hey, look at me. I've been doing this series on this podcast with this guy, Thomas De Zengotita, who wrote this book, Mediated. And he talks a lot about how everybody was famous when they had a tribe. Like, it's in our DNA to be very responsive to fame and accolades and all of these things, because everybody knew each other when it was just these small little groups of people.
That's
and
interesting.
It's fascinating when you really.
I will say that most people are completely powerless over fame. Like, fame is by far the driver of most people. Not everyone. There's some people that like power, some people that like money. But the people people always think, oh, this person likes money. The people that like money are so small, like it's less than 1% of the people. It's something like way over 95% that want fame, and it's just so intoxicating to people. Even if you get a little bit of it, think about it, right? Like just you get like 5 likes, and then people are literally changing their whole thing. They're like, oh my god, how do I figure out a way to get those 5 likes again, right? Like it's just there's something about it that like.
We talk a lot about that on here too. Just yesterday, I talked to a TikTok star and an influencer, and we were talking about audience capture, which is a conversation I have with journalists and influencers. And it's how do you avoid being captured by your audience, because you know what to feed them. You know what they want. You can see it analytically. You know what the algorithm responds to and what your audience responds to. And it's subconsciously, even if you think you're outsmarting it or you're guarding yourself against it, it's too much wired into our psychology to, I don't know how you get outside of that. And by the way, there's billions of dollars of research and development that go into all of these apps to tickle those little buttons in your brain. You think you're going to outsmart them? I'm not that smart or, self-aware. Even as self-aware as I might consider myself, it's still intoxicating, like you say. It's so cool. I love your story. I could talk to you for ages. Please, I think what you're doing is so cool, and your success is, what are you pivoting into new realms, or are you just staying the course with this?
Yeah, I think we're staying the course on this. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of different things that we're thinking about doing. We're thinking about going into the podcast area, but we want to do it in a way that makes sense, We're moving into TV too.
You should totally have a podcast, by the way.
I know, but see, the thing is, it's like it takes up so much time, right? Like people listen to it, just think, hey, you just show up and hit a mic, and then.
I mean, if you have money and you can have a producer, that's absolutely the case. If you have someone who can post it for you and produce it for you, you can just show up. I have friends who make a lot of money podcasting, and they just show up. And I one of the videos that came out yesterday or was going around on Twitter was Rogan when he discovered podcasting. He was on Tom Green's. And you can see him, and he's like, we need to figure out how to monetize this. This is amazing. And I'm like, oh, the vision that man had. He saw what it was, and you see him recognizing that. And it still feels like I would listen to your podcast. You have you have just a wealth of experience, a fascinating perspective, and I don't think that people will say it's saturated, and it is. There's a lot, but there's so many people. There's just little, you already have an audience, a huge audience, so you can.
I know. That's the thing, right? Like it's like you do you don't want to really take advantage of the audience. So it's like we can podcast companies come at us all the time. They're like, hey, do like a wrap up of whatever celebrity news
the
thing,
soup or whatever,
people or whatever, right? Like you can do that, but I'm just like, we want to do something good, right? Like, we don't want to just do something for the sake of doing it. It has to be something different, right? Like with the TV thing that we're doing is going to be something different. People are going to be like, oh my god, this is so cool! Like you're doing like something right, because it's like it comes back to like that same thing that I learned that first time, right? Like I'm not just doing things for like a money grab kind of thing. It doesn't work. It doesn't, long run, it doesn't work. You're just wasting your time and your effort. But if you do something that actually is going to like affect people, and people are going to be like, oh my God, this is great. This has actually improved my life. If I could figure out a way to do a podcast that's going to do that, then yeah, I'm with it. I'm 100% on board to kind of go about and do it. But if it's just going to be something that just like, pimp out the brand a little bit more and get a check from some company to like do something, that's not what we're really into. We've always stayed away from that, and I think your audience appreciates that too. They're not like, hey, oh my God, what are you doing? You're getting in bed with everybody to like do it.
One of the things I'm fascinated about, I'm like you, I look at a lot of the discourse occurring, and one of the things I'm fascinated about is this like discussion around hustle culture. I grew up with hustle culture and now it's kind of falling out of fashion, which I find interesting. And I don't really I see this discussion happening on like Twitter, but I haven't seen anyone really frame this and approach it and say like, what is it? What do we feel? How do you feel about it? How come it's falling out of fashion? I don't know. It just feels like a topic that's like ripe for exploitation and exploration.
I definitely, there's all kinds of great ideas. I'd love to talk offline. Maybe we can come up with something.
Yeah, I think you have like the sky's the limit, and you're doing TV too.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just so impressed. Someday.
16 years, right? Like how long have you been doing this?
I mean, it's tough because I started the first iteration of this in 2006, but then I went through a lot. I gave up on the idea. I was bankrupt. I was lost. I got sober in 2013. I feel like that's when things started clicking again. And then 2015, I started writing for Playboy, which is what I always wanted to do, is be a writer. And I had that. And then I became like an accidental pundit because of the crazy world that started shifting all around me. And I was like, what is going on? And now I feel like things have settled down a little bit and I'm back into my roots of like, why did I start this company? Why, I started this in 2018, so not that long, but I've learned so much. And mostly it's like, I do this podcast because I love talking to people like you. I just love hearing their stories.
See, that's what I do. I like talking to people too.
Yeah.
So that it would probably be something like that. But then nobody's really going to watch, right? Because after like 4 or 5 episodes, I'll have told all the stories that I have, and you'd be like, okay, there you go.
You say that, but it's not true. That's not the case. I could point to my show. I could point to Rogan, who, he just likes talking to people. It doesn't have to be, I think people want to know. This was something that someone in radio explained to me. They're like, they want to know what your perception is. They want to know the questions you're going to ask this person. They want to know yeah, I don't know. I think I'm fully supportive of I would love to do like, I have TV ideas. I have the whole idea for my company started as a greeting card line. And that's where I'd love to get back. It was cards that say what the other cards are thinking. And it was all for like dysfunctional families because I came from just insanity. And I saw this hole in the market. And now they kind of exist, but they're still not really going as hard as my cards were going. So I still see this hole in the market. And I'm like, I will make these cards.
I think I might buy some of those cards too.
Oh, they're so much fun. So yeah, I just really am excited to see what more you have coming for the world. I think it's just the beginning. And as you know, in media, maybe you won't be in a factory with a $10 billion company, but media makes billions of dollars too. So
yeah. Let's hope, pray, right?
What's your biggest defective character?
I tend to obsess too much, probably about work.
And what's your biggest asset?
Then I tend to obsess over work.
It's always often like two sides of the same coin, I find, when people answer this question. And where can we find you?
I'm not really on social media.
Smart.
Yeah, I know. It's just I don't really have much to do. What am I going to post pictures of my kids?
But do you lurk?
I do.
Okay.
Well, I don't really lurk. Like I go on. Oh, this is an interesting thing. I know we're about to.
No, it's fine. I don't want to take up your time. So just don't worry about
me. I got
me.
to run soon, but this is one thing. So I don't go on. I'm not on Instagram. I don't do any. I don't follow anyone. I don't like anything. I just keep it because sometimes people be like, "Oh, go on Instagram and see this," and you kind of have to because you can't just go online. They'll make you like actually use the app to go see certain things. Or after like 2 views, you have to go on the app, right? So I have the app, so I'm on the app, and but I never like anything. I'm just using it to like look at what's there. And so one day, someone was like, "Oh, let me see like your like the scroll, like the about us or whatever." just to see what's on there, because I had never liked anything and I'd never followed anyone. So you figure like, what is it that they're going to see? And it was nothing but like bikini women, all of it. Right. And then I look at my friends, every guy that's there, that's all they have on their thing. Right.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you out there like liking it? They're like, no. Because these are guys like with wives and kids. You don't want to like, you're liking it. And then your wife looks at this and they're like, what is this? Right.
Yeah.
So they're not doing that. There's something about like Instagram that they like feed you that. That's like the default. They feed you a bunch of that. And then like maybe if you like say no to it, then maybe they, show you Andrew Tate or something.
That's really funny. Yeah, I was thinking too about just when you were talking about the things that people say to you online. I had this hilarious comedian, Ian Lara, on, and he was like, I just am baffled. I will post something of my comedy and people in the comments will tell me to take my life. And just the way he said it, I was like, it is so ridiculous and funny and weird that we live in that world. He's like, they will tell me you should take your life because of this stand-up routine.
You're right.
It's just such a strange world, but I'm excited for everyone to go check out. I mean, they can go check out your website. We can promote that.
Check out MediaTakeout.com. You'll enjoy yourself. You'll have fun.
It is fun.
And then maybe you'll come back and I'll be on this podcast again. Who knows?
You can come back anytime. You have an open invite. Anytime you want to chat about anything. I think it'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
Okay. Checking in.
Was San Francisco the hellscape that we're all told? Did you notice?
Yes and no. So my family, my parents and my sister were like, well, this isn't nearly as bad as I've heard. I'm like, well, you're not in the Tenderloin.
And also maybe you watch like news that exaggerates it.
Right. That's what my dad was saying. He was like, it's not the hellscape we've been led to believe. But,
Tucker.
Driving in for sure, I was looking, just out on the street. There's definitely an increase in just homeless, like some guy was pooping in the street, just in the middle of the morning, I'm just like, this is gross. I just feel like the people who live there have become a little immune to it. And then, because we were kind of in the nicer areas, my family didn't necessarily notice, but it was overall a great trip, gorgeous weather. I mean, I love that city. The architecture is beautiful.
It's a crime.
It's just, and there's still so much going on. Like we were out and went to a bunch of different restaurants. They've got such great food and it was fabulous. It was just a great trip. Good time with my family. No major incidents. We met my sister-in-law's family, which was awesome. They're fantastic. So it all went really well. It was a lot of fun. Kind of a whirlwind of activities, but great.
Yeah.
And you had your own whirlwind.
It was strange going because it was so busy. We were just jammed every single day. And I do know so many people. So even the nights, I went to go see Rogan's show one night. I went out with a bunch of our mutuals there, like Malice and Chris Williamson and Blair White and just the whole crew. And I think we had one night where we didn't do anything and we just kind of tried to recover. And then we were basically back on a plane and our daughter was such a trooper. I mean, there was one day where she was in and out of the car probably 20 times.
Wow.
Because we were looking at places and, seriously considering
doing some house hunting.
Yeah, we were serious. We're getting serious about the becoming another, California refugee.
LA transplant.
If we do move, I'm re-registering my car like first thing. Get that.
I know, me too. I was thinking that too the other day. You just don't want to be marked.
No, I don't. Yeah. There's a lot of animosity towards the California influx. And not animosity, but it's funny. It's from people who are from California. So they were joking about how they were driving and they're like, it's some asshole in an Audi cut me off. and they had California plates. And I was like, you guys are from California. But what's funny that seems, and I'm sure this will happen to me, there is something so specific about the Texas mentality that it's like once you move to Texas, you become a Texan.
Huh.
And people really adopt that. Even today when I was talking to Malice, because I was on his podcast, he's now such a Texan.
Wow.
Where he'll be like, you keep that attitude out of our state. I'm like, you were a New Yorker, like your entire.
I know, he was just a diehard New Yorker.
Maybe diehard New Yorkers are more susceptible, but I'm excited at the idea of it, because when I was there, and it was weird because we were there for a week, and let me tell you, living out of a hotel with a 10-month-old and nowhere else to go when they're napping, and the pack and play was kind of rickety, so we didn't really trust to leave her. It was extra.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. I was taking pictures of just our little janky setups that we had, and it was really fun. It was fun. It was a fun adventure.
Yeah.
But it was definitely like at night, we'd put her to bed at 8, and then we'd just sit in the little area right in front of the bathroom and have like little picnics
Whisper
where we
to each other.
Yeah, we would text each other. We'd be just having a little text message conversation over our tacos.
Wow.
But what was I saying? It was when I was there, I could feel how much closer to our family I was.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is so nice. And I was talking about this with Malice. It just splits that difference. It's such a huge, it just felt closer to them.
Yeah. It's a 3-hour flight, not a 6-hour flight.
And now it's one of the many. I've lived in I've lived in Utah with you. Mm-hmm. I've lived on the East Coast. I've lived in Minnesota and the Midwest. I've done the West Coast, and now it's Texas.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not really the South, but I've almost lived in all of the United States.
Yeah.
If we move there.
Yeah, you've lived in the Pacific Northwest.
I want to move there. I really like it. I really think, the weather it's going to be weather, which actually is exciting to me. It was cold when we were there, which wasn't bad at all. They had just come out of the deep freeze, which again, just like, it is amazing how much ice on huge trees will just like fuck a place up.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And they were still trying to kind of recover from that ice storm when we were there. And a lot of people didn't have power for 5 days at a time.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect.
Nowhere is. Yeah.
The energy prices everybody's getting whacked with this fake crisis of energy that we've created.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know. But everybody seems so much happier there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure maybe in 10 years it'll be LA or like the southern version of LA or something, because you can see tech is coming in and the building, just driving around, even the difference between 2020 when we were driving around looking for places versus now, where all of those places were kind of ideas, but they weren't fully developed. It is insane. Just everywhere you go.
Wow.
It's so crazy. It's really, I have not seen anything like it since when we moved to Minnesota, and where we lived was all basically cornfields. And by the time we left, it was all planned developments.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I know. And that's the thing that struck me when I was there, was just like the energy, the vibe. It's different. It feels like youthful and hopeful and like upswell.
I know. I said to Malice today, he said, what was your impression? I said, it feels, and this may be cheesy, but it feels like the American dream is still alive in Texas. Mm-hmm. And it still feels optimistic, and you can have a good life for your family. And I don't know, people just seem generally happy. And right. I know the traffic's getting worse.
No, I mean, everything, it's like, I'm trying not to idealize it, because nowhere's perfect. And it's just, we're so ready for a change, and it's time to kind of just move on.
And everyone's like, oh, look out, Texas is very liberal, or Austin. And it is. Austin is very left. It's always been very liberal in the heart of this very much Texas. Uh-huh. And you have the same thing in California, where it's a lot of red surrounding blue cities, but it's still it's still a uniparty in California. To a certain extent, it is in Texas too. Texas, I was reading a whole article. Texas is getting redder, and California is getting bluer.
Yeah.
So they're becoming more entrenched in their own, team or whatever. But the writing on the wall here, even if it will eventually turn around and the ship will right itself and people will just have, I don't know what it takes. I don't know how many times you have to see somebody defecate in a street or ODing or have to drive around the homeless encampment that's spilled into the road that you're paying for, or just having to numb yourself to that level of dehumanization, which is, again, there's some of it in Austin, but it's just not the same level, and it doesn't feel like they're valuing those lives over the taxpayers' lives.
Right.
Where here it feels like there's this huge, almost weird resentment from the government towards small businesses, people who pay their taxes, families. It's very strange to me. That I don't feel that in Texas. It still feels like
they want to encourage that.
I was dying laughing though, and there's definitely a stand-up routine here, and I'm going to work it out. We were reading through some of the HOA requirements and the different, because I was like, I never in a million years would have guessed that I would be considering living in some suburban development in Texas.
Life is weird.
Life is so weird. But we were reading like all the different HOA, like the million bylaws that they have or whatever. And one of it was like about flags. And it's like, you can only fly an American flag and you have to hang it the right way. And a military flag and one college flag. Other than that, you keep your other flags out of here. No one wants to know if you're MAGA or trans.
That's hilarious.
We don't want to see your "in this house we believe" signs. We want a nice uniform suburb where everyone is a wholesome American.
Wow, that's really funny.
And I went to seeing Rogan's new club and then he did a show at the Vulcan, which has become their kind of home until his club opens, which will be soon, I think. And just hearing the comedians, it's so refreshing. It's just hearing people laugh about the pandemic, and I could never like butcher any of their bits, but they were just inappropriate comedy.
Right. Is like still allowed there.
Yeah, and just everybody laughing and having a good time, and that release that comes when you're laughing at those things that are hard or inappropriate or the taboos. And Rogan's got some new stuff that's so good. It's just, he's just so, it's been fun to see how great he's becoming as a comedian. His stuff is just, his insight into the human condition is truly special. And it's from his podcast.
Right.
So much of it is informed by just him talking to the best people at the top of their field for 3 hours a day, 4 days a week.
Right.
I do not include myself in that. I'm the relief.
Yeah, I'm just some mid-levels.
I'm a midwit. I'm one of those. Yeah. It was fun to do that. I felt very comfortable and like myself. You know, I just felt very grounded and present.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to watch this latest episode yet.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
He's just a mensch. I just adore that man. And he's been so supportive, and it really is wild to see just what an absolute force of nature he is.
Yeah. When
people give him shit and they're like, oh, you're like one of those little Rogan orbits, and they say that to Malice, it's like, well, the guy is like has his own force of gravity.
Yeah, he is gravity.
Like a planet,
just pulls people in.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to be around all of your like-minded buddies, and why wouldn't you want to have them around if you were him and you were us? People are funny about that stuff. I'm trying to manage my expectations, but like Jaren and I were talking about today, I kind of have to treat it almost like the baby, where I had to manage my expectations and I was always trying to protect myself from being disappointed. But I feel like no matter what happens with whatever place I want to get or where we end up, this is happening. Yeah. It's just a matter of when.
And I think too, it's like no matter what, because we keep being like, if we hate it, we can move. You know, like if we absolutely hate it,
everybody
but I don't think
it.
we're going to hate it.
I've heard of one story of people who went there and came back. Yeah. And I'm sure there are more stories of that, but I don't think we're going to hate it.
I don't think we are either. But I'm like, at the very least, we're going to be getting more space. And that is our number one like reason for needing to move over everything, over anything, is we need more space to do what we are trying to do.
And I'm excited at the idea of, because we'd all be moving together and you don't have a place of all of us landing and you and I living together, because when we do live together, we get so much work done.
It's an explosion of work.
Even more than,
I
was like, oh my gosh, maybe we can get some whiteboards
and actually work on our scripts again. We should just put all those whiteboards around.
No, we're getting new ones, damn it.
No, new ones. But put up like 4 different whiteboards again.
And be like, at last,
a dream.
A room with a whiteboard.
Have to get some cloud pictures up too.
No. I mean, we really have come a long way.
We'll be able to afford shelves, like bookshelves, not just boxes.
Although it is good to also have like our executive board of directors, aka my much smarter relative uncle, who like viciously looks at all of our stuff and is like, I'm a little worried.
It's like, I see what you're saying.
I'm like, you think that I'm not
I know.
Up at night staring at the ceiling?
It's definitely a concern, but it's like make or break it time.
I'm worried, but I've been in worse positions.
Yeah.
You know, worst case scenario, I go back to waiting tables and Jaron goes back to being a manager at Trader Joe's and we still get to do our thing.
Yeah. Whatever.
We'll just be in.
Those aren't your only options either.
They might still be my only options.
No.
I would like to go back to working at a little greasy spoon in Texas.
Maybe when you retire.
Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.